So my first guest says that some FOMC participants are probably concerned that easier monetary policies increasing financial instability are good. Let's bring in now Yardeni Research President and Chief Investment Strategist, Ed Yardeni. Ed, is that what you, I mean, Jay Powell came out guns blazing. He made no bones about it. Where's the quote? I think we have it up there. He's just like, listen, December's not a given. It's not a foregone conclusion. Far from it. Right? But he put that out there right away. Mm-hmm. What was needling him?
Well, I think he's must be concerned about potentially creating some financial instability by continuing to get the market all hyped up about more rate cuts coming. He didn't even say that the decision will be meeting to meeting. He just said, basically said it's just not going to, not in the cards right now, and we're back into kind of a pose mode. So I think that and he must be also concerned that inflation actually is 3%, not 2%, and the labor market has got some issues that maybe he's recognizing can't be solved with easier monetary policy.
Well, he didn't say that, though. He said that he's not seeing any issues with labor. Right? He was pretty sanguine about labor, and that really, I think, caught a lot of people off guard.
That caught everybody off guard,
I just don't see how anyone in his position can sort of not see there's a labor crisis here.
Well, he changes his tune quite drastically, obviously, and the market swooned somewhat, but it wasn't a terrible swoon. But look, everybody knows there's problems in the labor markets, but I think the idea that lowering interest rates and creating more demand is going to solve the problem isn't really the issue. The issue is things like a freezing of migration inflows, the deportations.
So if we have more people, employment would go up. There would be demand that's not there now. If we brought in 1 million people, half of them on welfare, the other half with crowd-out schools, kids in Chicago who already have one kid for 50 kids for one teacher would have 70 kids for one teacher. That would be the economic elixir we're desiring in this country? More illegal people? Come on, Ed. When you come in the Congress, I can't take it anymore.
Charles, you're taking me way out of context
here. But more people coming in won't create...
I'm just saying, as a matter of fact, the labor supply has stopped growing. It's actually decreasing.
Right. And the layoffs are going up.
Hold on.
Why do we need more supply? We need jobs.
And labor demand has come down.
Right.
Okay? And I think a lot of that has to do with the companies deciding that with artificial intelligence, they better look into it and decide whether they really need more people. Also, Charles, as you know, there was a lot of hiring post-pandemic, and I think some companies maybe have concluded that their labor forces are bigger than they have to be. But demand, as you know, Charles, was very, very strong. We've got real GDP grown over 3.5% for 2 quarters in a row. So stimulating the economy even more isn't going to create jobs. It might create more speculative excesses in the marketplace.
But does that point to a new paradigm where AI is now creating more GDP growth than consumption, which is typically 2/3 the economy? So, but the AI miracle won't be with us forever.
Well,
should Powell say yesterday, I no longer consider us to have a dual mandate. Since we can do nothing about labor, I mean, he should have declared then we don't want the role anymore.
Well, in effect, you're right. He said that, in effect, by kind of saying the labor market's okay. The labor market's not okay, and I didn't come anywhere close to implying that. I'm just saying the Fed can't do much about it because there are issues in the labor market that are not solvable with lower interest rates.
Let me ask you about the reaction so far. A little bit up on the bond yields, S&P down, NASDAQ down. That might have more to do with Meta than the Fed. Mm-hmm. It feels like the street still doesn't believe Powell. I mean, maybe he doesn't want to cut. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's got his own issues, but I still think the Wall Street believes that at some point the Fed's going to be accommodative. Are they reading that right?
Well, I think that they are reading it right. I think that the Fed still is talking about lowering interest rates. Even Powell said that they're still restrictive. He still kind of believes that the Fed funds rate's above the neutral rate. He was a little fuzzy about what the neutral rate is these days, but the attitude was that the Fed's restrictive and that over time we'll see lower interest rates. But my position is that the economy is at Nirvana. I mean, we've got an unemployment rate at 4.3%, and we've got inflation at 3%. That probably would be at 2%, but for the tariffs, so I think if we wait, it'll get there.
Well, he mentioned a non-tariff. He brought out some new metrics for us yesterday. He said non-tariff, we would probably be close to 2%.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Look, I think the story here is pretty straightforward, and that is we got a productivity boom. And at the same time, and the productivity boom is actually being motivated by a shortage of labor.
Would you say
especially skilled labor?
This is more powerful than the productivity boom that Greenspan used to brag about all the time?
Well, I think with the benefit of hindsight, some of that productivity boom back in the late 1990s was producing more Dell boxes with software that had the applications of Excel and Word. And once everybody had that, there wasn't too many applications that you could use it for. I think this is a much better productivity boom because I think the digital revolution, which we've been in since 1965, has gotten to the point now where we all have access to supercomputing. Supercomputing is basically what artificial intelligence is all about.
They're giving me the rap signal in my ear, but I can't let you go without asking because you've been bullish. You've been right. You've been bullish when almost everyone on Wall Street wasn't.
Right.
But I think I read where you expect maybe a near-term pullback, in part because, optimism, too much optimism out there.
Too many bulls.
Too many bulls.
Too many bulls.
I also saw the National Association of Active Managers are over 100%, over 100 now. And so it feels like either they were late, but whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe a little air out this, but don't give up longer term.
Yeah, longer term. I've been talking about the roaring 2020s, and now I'm starting to talk about the roaring 2030s. So I'm looking ahead.
All right. Well, I hope you keep coming on, even though I got
absolutely. No, fine.
Guys, I can't square it but I'm not an economist. I try to square that part.
I'll come back and we'll do some more squaring.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to chalkboard next time.